Lane Lambert getting Coach of the Year buzz. Is that even a good thing? How close are the Kraken to winning a title? And we look overseas at our Seattle Torrent in the Olympics coming up on Locked On Kraken.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm Zane Begg alongside Glenn Dreyfus with Davy Jones Locker Room, and welcome to Locked On Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. And Glenn, the other day, Greg Wyshynski of ESPN put out an article about where they were with the awards predictions, and Coach Lane Lambert was one of the finalists predicted for the Jack Adams Award for Coach of the Year. This surprised me a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit, to hear his name in the buzz. And so I started looking into the history of the Jack Adams Award. And you and I have both noted in the past that it kind of seems like a curse. So there's a lot to go into, and I have a ton of information. But before I really start going in and hitting people hard with the facts, your thoughts?
Well, it's instructive to know what the award criteria actually is. The Jack Adams Award is presented by the NHL Broadcasters Association, and it goes to, quote, the NHL coach adjudged to have contributed the most to his team's success. So it's not the best coach, just like the most valuable player award isn't a best player award. And you can say that Lane Lambert, to this point in the season, has gotten about the most that can be gotten out of this Seattle Kraken roster. So it is reasonable to think that he might be up for the award, or at least under consideration.
So I think that that's an interesting language, that the coach who contributed most of the teams winning, because what is interesting is that when a coach wins the Jack Adams Award, the next year, it really doesn't look good. So I'm going to pull up a chart here, and apologies to our audio listeners. I will try to explain what's going on in the chart. But these are all the Jack Adams Award winners in the salary cap era. And the bars represent how much the team's point percentage dropped the next year. So these dramatic shifts to the left, where it's red, that's where they regressed the next year, or they fell back the next year. We only had 2 modest gains the year after winning the Jack Adams Award. So what ends up happening is something occurs within a hockey season that appears to be unsustainable. And then the following year, that unsustainable thing doesn't happen. And then they say, oh no, you've lost the team.
Wait, you're telling me the unsustainable thing is unsustainable?
It is unsustainable, and people get caught up in this, and they think it's sustainable, and it's just historically not. These are all of their Jack Adams finalists, and you can see most of them are to the left of the 0 point change line. If these were the coaches that are contributing the most to their teams winning, then why is it the next year they are not contributing at all, or their contributions no longer are contributing to their team winning, but rather they're falling off by and large, and then they're back to where they were before this one season where they were contributing so much? We have an example of this in the Kraken's history, right? Year 2, Dave Hagstall, and everyone's like, "Oh, this team is great. Yeah, they're in the playoffs, and yeah, they upset Colorado, and they went 7 games against Dallas, and like they're scoring by committee, and they figured out a new way to build a hockey roster." And it turns out that it was just an unsustainable shooting percentage bender. And then the next year, none of the unsustainable stuff became sustainable. And now the Kraken are in this bad spot and they think they're contenders and they're spending money on free agents like they're contenders. And John Forsland says that making the playoffs that year was a curse, which I agree with. And I can kind of see the same thing happening this year again.
Well, I want to mention that Dave Hackstall year, the three finalists were Jim Montgomery, who won the award with the Bruins, Lindy Ruff, and Dave Hackstall. And in short order, all three of them got fired.
It is not a good thing, I think.
Well, the poster child for this is Ted Nolan. In June 1997, Nolan of the Sabres won the Jack Adams. June of 1997, June. Then star goalie Dominik Hasek said he didn't like Nolan. The team hired a general manager. He didn't like Nolan. And by the end of that same month, June 1997, Nolan wasn't coach of the Sabres anymore. The same month.
And he didn't get another NHL coaching job for a long time after that.
Yeah, a decade.
Yeah. So congratulations, you're coach of the year. Now you won't be coaching in the NHL for a long time. I was going to go with Daryl Sutter, who was the reigning Jack Adams Award winner when he was fired. I think when Atlanta fired Bob Hartley, that was also a year after he won the award. So it's an award that is often and largely based on you overachieved expectations. But the problem is the year after that, when that comes crashing down, then you say, hey, we have these high expectations set for you. How come you didn't meet them? You're the reigning Jack Adams Award winner, or you're a Jack Adams finalist. We just gave you a contract extension. I'd like to note that when Dave Hackstall was a Jack Adams finalist, the Kraken gave him a contract extension, and then they fired him before his contract extension even kicked in.
What's so instructive in this, I found, were the comments of another Jack Adams winner, Ken Hitchcock. And a little background on Hitchcock. His first full 8 seasons coaching in the NHL, his teams never had fewer than 101 standings points. And one of those seasons, he was a Stanley Cup winner with Dallas. So the man knows how to coach. In 2011-12, he wins Coach of the Year for leading the St. Louis Blues to first place in the Central Division. And here's what Hitchcock said about what happened to him afterward. Quote, "What I really noticed was that expectations changed dramatically. We were so happy just being relevant again. In the year that he won the Jack Adams, the team finished first. The next year, I felt a lot more pressure off the bat. I felt that in training camp. I felt it in exhibition games. I felt a lot more pressure to do it a little bit better. That's a tough burden to carry and an unfair burden." I added that last part.
Well, so the good news is that I don't think Lane Lambert is actually in contention for the Jack Adams Award. The reason is that there are better candidates. Also, historically, he just doesn't, they haven't quite improved enough to outdo some of the other candidates here. So we have a graph here, and I've kind of mapped out the historical nominee zone where most of the nominees, or really all of the nominees, fall into. And the point percentage improvement for Jack Adams finalist, Lane Lambert, is on the cusp of. There are also 4 other candidates with higher point improvements and this year. So I don't think that Lane Lambert will, in fact, be a Jack Adams Award finalist. I don't think he's going to win the award, and I don't think it's a good thing if he does. I don't think it's like an awful thing. I don't think it's like a harbinger of doom or it's a curse necessarily, but I think it puts unfair expectations on any coach because of the lack of internalization of the randomness in hockey and not being willing to accept that you can go a whole season and have really poor underlying numbers, but being bailed out by goaltending or shooting percentage, which is great for that season, but then organizations operate as if that is now the blueprint moving forward. And then the next year happens and they're like, oh no, what happened to our blueprint? Let me go and let's panic buy Chandler Stevenson for 7 years and maybe he'll fix it. And now we are where we are.
Well, as you know, Zame, as a poker player, just because you draw to an inside straight doesn't mean that the next hand you're going to draw to an inside straight or a straight flush or something better and keep improving every time. I heard one writer call it not the Jack Adams curse, but the Jack Adams effect. You know, you can't expect that you're just going to do better and then better the next year and then better the next year when what you won the award for was overachieving.
Well, one thing that you can't do better than is actually win the title. We are going to talk about if the Kraken could pull a Seattle Seahawks and shock the world by winning the cup, coming up after the break. Cold days, packed schedules, and big goals. That's winter. And when there's not a lot of time to cook, eating well can feel like another thing on the to-do list. That's where Factor comes in. Factor makes healthy eating easy with fully prepared meals designed by dietitians and crafted by chefs so you can eat well without the planning, prepping, or cooking. Factor meals are always fresh, never frozen, and ready in about 2 minutes with no refined sugars, no artificial sweeteners, and no refined seed oils. Head to factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL50off and use code LockedOnNHL50off to get 50% off and free breakfast for a year. Eat like a pro this month with Factor. New subscribers only, varies by plan, 1 free breakfast item per box for 1 year while subscription is active. Yesterday, the Seattle Seahawks won the Super Bowl 29-13. Congratulations to Mike McDonald and John Schneider and Sam Darnold and Leonard Williams and all the other Seahawks. What does this have to do with the Seattle Kraken? Well, the Seahawks before the season were not expected to be a playoff team. They were certainly not expected to be a Super Bowl contender. They were 60-1 to win the Super Bowl before the season started. But through the power of friendship and good coaching, and also a very talented roster, they were able to not only beat the fraudulent schedule merchant New England Patriots, but they humiliated the fraudulent schedule merchant New England Patriots. The Kraken were 200-1 to win the Stanley Cup before the season started. Now they're overachieving. No one thought they would be in a playoff spot. Right now they are. So why can't we do it again? Why not just run it back? Your thoughts?
Well, I don't know what they put in your protein shake this morning, Zane, but sure, let's discuss it. Here's how else the Seahawks victory is relevant to the Kraken. We always talk about the Kraken and that they to win have to play low event hockey. Means not very exciting. Well, let me put the lie to that, because the first 3 quarters of the Super Bowl was low event football. I mean, it was, in the words of an NBC Olympics commentator, boring. I mean, what if they held a Super Bowl and nothing happened? For 3 quarters, field goals or nothing. But did that keep people from taking to the streets outside Lumen Field and dancing and shouting and being ecstatic? And will that keep the parade on Wednesday from being a sight to behold? No, because when you win, that is not boring. And if the Kraken have to win their games with shots being 19-16 or winning 2-1, no, if you win that game That's not boring. And if you were to make the playoffs and get in the playoffs and win those games, winning is never boring. And if you have to do it with low event games instead of 1980s Edmonton Oilers where you win each game 8-6, fine, because you're winning and no one would be complaining. So, hey, this year more than recent years, if you get in the playoffs, as Ron Francis has said, if you get in the playoffs, who knows? Because the teams are also bunched up. And as we know, it's not the best team necessarily that wins championships. It's the hottest team. It's the team that figures it all out and is all coming together. Maybe in this case, the Seahawks did have the best roster. Usually it's not the team with the best roster. Surely in the NHL, talk about your curses. It isn't just Jack Adams. How about the President's Trophy winner curse? The team that goes through the 82-game grind with the most points most often doesn't win the championship. So why not the Kraken?
Why not the Kraken? Well, I'm going to tell you why, Glenn. So I looked at the last 15 Stanley Cup champions and their expected goal differential. I want to add as a quick aside, we're using my expected goals model, the Davy Jones locker room expected goals model. I was using money pucks, but there were some accuracy issues that have since been documented. So if you really care about where exactly these numbers are coming from, they're coming from inside the house. The regular season expected goal differential of the Stanley Cup champions, you have just the Washington Capitals as a team that was 26th in goal differential as the outlier. Everybody else, except for also the Boston Bruins, who broke even, were pretty solid, like real solid in expected goal differential. And in fact, just to make the Stanley Cup Finals, and I have here this graph, and so you look at all of the Cup finalists since 2010 and where they were in expected goals. And they're both near the top. Again, you have that Washington team that's an outlier. There was a Nashville team that lost to the Penguins that was 19th in expected goal differential. But if you look over to this season, if you look where Seattle is, they are not anywhere near the neighborhood of your Stanley Cup finalists. If you want to cling to the Washington example or exception, then that's your little bit of hope. But it is a tall order to make the Cup final, let alone win it, especially when this is where the Kraken penalty kill is and where it ranks. So they have the 31st penalty kill, and that is just not going to get it done. So no team has made the Stanley Cup Finals with a penalty kill ranking that poor. All that's to say, Glenn, is the expected goal differential is not in line with what you see from a Stanley Cup contender. The penalty kill is definitely not what you see that's in line with the Stanley Cup contender. And if we want to talk about the roster construction, who is driving these Cup winning teams? It's an elite number one center. It's a strong number two center. It's an elite defenseman. And more often than not, a very strong scoring winger. The Kraken don't really have much of that. Matty Beniers is a good player, but I don't think he is ever going to be the elite lock for Team USA in 4 years kind of player that we hoped he was going to be after he won the Calder Trophy for Rookie of the Year. Chandler Stevenson was a good enough 2C on the team that won the Cup, but he's older and he is not playing with an elite winger in Mark Stone. Brandon Montour and Vince Dunn are maybe the closest thing you have to an elite defenseman. I don't think they're in the Victor Hedman or Cale Makar or even Gustav Forsling area. And then goaltending is really volatile, so a goalie could get hot. But the Kraken don't have the pieces. They don't have that elite center that's driving play. They don't have Sidney Crosby or Nathan McKinnon or Connor McDavid or Sasha Barkov. They don't have In Tampa's case, I guess Nikita Kucherov is a winger and not a center, was their elite scorer. The Kraken don't have any of those, oh my goodness, what a superstar players. Not yet. Maybe Berkeley Catton gets there. I don't know. But I wanted to throw a little bit of cold water on the idea that maybe this team could go on a run. Although now that makes me sound like a jerk, because I don't actually want to throw cold water. I would love this team to go on a run, and I would love for them to win the Stanley Cup, and I would love to dance in the streets in Seattle and go to the parade and have fireworks that were going off until 3 a.m. last night. That would be a great problem to have, but unfortunately, I don't think this Kraken team is it.
Well, what they're missing, as you have pointed out, is the elite players, and that's not rocket science. And the problem with not having an elite player is that the Kraken model is built on everybody pulling on the rope the same direction, getting contributions, getting everyone to play their best every game. And human nature is that's not going to happen. And so if the Kraken don't have everybody playing at their best, and now you're counting on 19 guys, 19 skaters or 18 skaters and 2 goalies to be all playing at or near their best every game, versus sometimes when you have elite players, they can carry you. If the other supporting cast members have an off night, that's what the Kraken don't have, that they can't win when they're not at their best. And it's unrealistic, talking about sustainability as we have been, to expect that they're going to play near their maximum every time they step out on the ice.
Coming up next, we go overseas to Italy to check in on our Seattle Torrent in the Olympics. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. And when you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. If I need to hire someone for this show, I'd go straight to Indeed and be very specific about what I need. Real experience, not just a resume buzzword. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/LOCKEDON right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. Thank you for making Locked On Kraken part of your daily listening routine. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. And if you haven't already, please go check out our new Everydayer Club. This gives you access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Kraken wherever you get your podcasts. And you also get an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of this show. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer or tap the link in the show notes to learn more. We have several of our Seattle Torrent overseas playing high-level women's hockey. Take us through what happened over the weekend.
The men's tournament, by the way, has not started yet. I'll mention that and the Kraken involved in a moment. But as you say, the women's ice hockey tournament at Milan Cortina is underway and has showcased again that unlike the men, where several countries have a legitimate shot at the gold, Team USA and Team Canada still head and shoulders above the women's teams from other countries. And the gap is closing, but it hasn't closed yet. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Saturday, Team USA shut out Finland 5-0. with the U.S. outshooting the Finns 49-11. The Torrents' Alex Carpenter got USA on the board first in the first period. Then the Americans got 3 in the middle period with Captain Hillary Knight of the Torrent. She's also captain of Team USA, scoring the goal that made it 4-0. It was the second goal of the tournament, each for Carpenter and Knight, and both came on the power play. Something else special about the Knight goal, it was her 14th career Olympic goal, tying her with Natalie Darwitz and Katie King for most ever by an American woman. And to make it more special, her parents were in attendance to see it. Told that she had tied the goal-scoring record, Knight said, quote, "I had no idea. I just love scoring." And not only is she going to have the goal-scoring record all to herself, maybe as soon as the next Team USA game, with 32 points now in Olympic competition, she's within 4 points of breaking the American women's record in the points category, too. Now, it should be noted that the Finnish women's team has been ravaged by a bout with norovirus, so bad that it caused a scheduled game against Canada to be postponed to February 12th. Now, Knight and Carpenter, 2 of 4 Torrent on the Team USA. If you're watching on YouTube, she's in the photo on the right here, congratulating Carpenter on her goal. Barnes did not record a point, but it was her outlet pass that created a Team USA 3-on-1 that they converted into their second goal. And she did get to share in the celebration after the goal. Speaking about Torrent players and power play goals, Team Canada's number 88, Julia Gosling, got one in Canada's 4-0 shutout of Switzerland on Saturday. Gosling was standing in front and tipped home a shot. Now, we talk about the disparity between Canada, U.S., and everybody else. Shots on goal in this game, Canada 55, Switzerland 6. One other game to mention, Torrent and Team Czechia defender Aneta Toralova on the right side of a 2-0 shutout of Finland. Czechia in this game played 11 forwards and 7D against Finland, with Taralova on the top defensive pairing. She played 23 minutes, 27 seconds, and was a +1. A little more about Taralova, number 2 here. She's 30 years old, hails from Prague, Czechia, has been a mainstay on the Czech national team since debuting in 2012 at just age 15. She's competed in 8 women's world championships, and in both 22 and 23, she helped lead Czechia to bronze medals, the country's first ever podium finishes at the top division levels. All 3 teams with Torrent players are in action today, Monday. Switzerland faces Team USA and Canada meets Czechia. As we mentioned, the men's hockey tournament kicks off Wednesday with 2 Kraken players involved. Finland meets Slovakia with Kraken forwards Capo Kakko and Eli Tolvanen, part of Team Finland's roster, Zane.
USA Switzerland is going on right now in the women's. It is 1-0 the first intermission. Hillary Knight, Captain America, with a secondary assist on the goal. Did you watch the open ceremonies?
No.
I did not see any NHL players, which I was expecting, except for Team Germany. One of the flag bearers was Leon Draisaitl. And for Team Czechia, one of the flag bearers was David Pastrnak. I was looking for NHL players for every other team. So my question is, I understand the NHL had been playing the previous day, so it is reasonable to think that the players wouldn't be available for the opening ceremonies, but Draisaitl and Pastrnak were there. So Philip Grubauer was not available versus his teammate was available? Did he choose not to? I'm really curious what went into the decision for players to either not be able to participate, not being available to, or choosing not to. I think that would be an interesting thing to ask Philip Grubauer, because I assumed, especially after seeing Canada, that we just wouldn't see any NHL players because they were still playing the previous day or 2 days prior. And then I saw the two NHLers and said, hey, well, wait a second. Now I was robbed. I was robbed of like a Philip Grubauer adorable little, stroll, or, an Oscar Fisker-Molgaard moment or something. I wanted to see Kraken in the opening ceremonies, and it didn't happen. And then I saw NHL players, and I had a lot of FOMO.
Maybe we'll get a chance to ask the German gentleman when he comes back to Seattle.
I assume they'll make him available post-Olympics for how was the Olympics kind of press conference, and I definitely will ask if someone else doesn't. Well, that does it for today's episode. Thank you for tuning in to Locked On Kraken. We will be back here tomorrow to cover more Olympics and more Kraken. Make sure you subscribe and follow Locked On Kraken so you get all of your latest episodes. You can find us at Davy Jones LR on all your social media platforms, or at DavyJonesLockerRoom.com, where we do print coverage of the Seattle Kraken. For those of you on video, we send you over to the first ever 24/7 national Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. On audio, make sure this is one of your 2 daily listens. For Davy Jones Locker Room and Locked On Kraken, I'm Zane Begg.
And I'm Glenn Dreyfus.
And we'll see you tomorrow.